today. Happy 4th of July weekend. The second weekend, I guess, right? We celebrated multiple weekends. And it didn't really feel like 4th of July, did it? Partly because it was in the middle of the week, and it rained. But partly because it's just sort of like crazy everywhere, it seems. So, I'm going to share with you some words from our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. Our inherent nature is forever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. We do well to listen to this inner voice, for it tells us of a life wonderful in its scope, of a love beyond our fondest dreams, of a freedom which the soul craves. And that's pretty much our theme for this month. We're going to look at that idea of freedom, that freedom factor that is ours by divine birthright. And obviously, we're going to kick it off today with the freedom of, right? The freedom to stand for. And there's not a word missing off of that statement. The idea is the freedom to stand for and not against. There was a sermon, what is called the Sermon by the Sea, was delivered by Dr. Holmes in 1959 at a beautiful place called Asilomar, which is up by Monterey. I can't remember the name of the town it's in. But anyway. And in this sermon, he said, "Find me one person who is for something and against nothing, who is redeemed enough not to condemn others out of the burden of his soul, and I will find you another Savior, another Jesus, and an exalted human being. Find me one person who is for something and against nothing." I think that should be the cry for the world right now, right? To be for something and against nothing. That's hard these days, to be against nothing, isn't it? Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's got some judgment, right? Everybody sort of needs to be right. Everybody's willing to do hate speech, hate action. I don't know, it's just crazy. And the one thing I'm reminded of is that when you read some of these older New Thought books by Eric Butterworth and you read some of the earlier works by Holmes, you read all of these different books, even to a certain extent, As a Man Thinketh. And they all start off with this idea of, yes, things are bad. Yes, things are in turmoil. Yes, 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 of all this bad stuff. But yet, in the middle of all of that is God and is good. In the middle of all of whatever's going on, there is God and there is good. And no matter who is saying what, there is good in it. And sometimes those opinions and judgments, they're just not in regard to world issues or political issues or country issues or weather issues. It also gets to that place where I think it's starting to impact people and families and relationships. And we all think we've got a right to share our opinion. And we do. But do we really have to? I mean, it's one thing to share it amongst our close group. It's another thing to share it because we want to be boisterous. We are tempted. Anybody remember Alice in Wonderland? And the Queen said, "Why, I think of at least a half a dozen impossible things before breakfast," right? In today's world, Today's world, we can be tempted to stand against a half a dozen things before that first cup of coffee if we let it. But we're here gathered in this loving community. We're here on this spiritual journey of deepening because I believe each and every one of us is willing and ready to put some good mojo into that race consciousness, into that cosmic soup. And we may not feel like our good mojo is making a difference, but it does. It really, truly does. There's a story of Mother Teresa. She was asked during the Vietnam War if she would attend a war protest, an anti-war protest, and she was like, no, but give me a peace rally and I'll be there. Find me one person and I will have found another Savior. It's such a tall order, but it's not impossible. It may be impossible all of the time, but it's totally possible for most of the time. Think about it. Find me one person who is willing, who is for something and against nothing. And then he writes, who is redeemed enough to not condemn others out of the burden of his soul. Redeemed. Saved from sin. You know, I used to think that this teaching didn't acknowledge sin. But the more I got into it, the more I realized it truly does acknowledge sin. Just in a different kind of a way, right? Sin, from an archery term, means more about missing the mark. Sin is about making a mistake, an error in our thinking. And that sin results in us paying the consequences until we're ready to change our erroneous thinking. To take a look at what error thinking has got us to this place and switch it. And I think each and every one of us are powerful enough to take on the challenge of switching any erroneous thinking about how wonderful and blessed we are as a people, as a country, as a world, to make a difference. You know, our erroneous thinking, we don't believe that we have the consequences, but we don't suffer through them. We switch it. Isn't that great? We don't need to blame it on anyone. We don't need to have anyone save us. We get to do all of that for ourselves. That's powerful. So erroneous thinking. There's a lot of ways to look at that, but it kind of boils down to three things. When things aren't going right, there's three things that we need to look at. Am I thinking that I'm separated from God? Am I thinking that you are separated from God? And am I thinking that we are separated from each other? If things aren't going right, one of those three things has come into our consciousness and we're paying attention to it. Because the truth, as Celeste so beautifully read this morning, is that we are all one. And that's where our power lies, is in that knowing we are all one. Truly, that's where our power is. And we can take a breath and remember that truth and state clearly, I am not separated from God, and I am not separated from you. And you are not separated from God, because we are all one. Now, for some people, It may be hard to think about the fact that they're not separated from God, but it's the truth. If it's the truth for one, it's the truth for all of us. It's so easy to find fault, but it can be just as easy to find good and beauty. It can be just as easy to turn the other cheek and change the subject. Leave the conversation, leave the room. And in that, we are still standing in our power. And we're still acknowledging our oneness, I believe. Because we are still in God's wholeness. With every conscious breath, it is God's wholeness that is filling us, is supporting us. Holmes goes on and writes in the textbook, true liberty comes through true harmony. True harmony comes through true unity. And true unity can come only through conscious realization that we are all one with God, and it is good. On my social feed, I've been getting a lot of messages that start, all is well, and all will be well, and in all things it is well. And that's sort of the theruth of it all. The truth of it all. So we're going to do something a little different here today. There's a gentleman, Dr. David Alt. He's a musician, he's a minister, he goes to Africa on different missions, and he's an all-around good guy. And he has a video called A New Pledge. So today I'm going to ask each of us, what are we willing to stand for? And what action can we take in what we're standing for? That's all. And David's got he's got some wonderful insights of what we can stand for. So, I'll be back in about 5 minutes.
I pledge allegiance to breaking the self-imposed barriers of my humanness. I recognize that my time on this planet is precious and limited. Every day is a canvas on which I can create. Every day is an opportunity for me to move in the direction of the dreams and the expanded vision I feel inside. By setting aside petty grievances, past mistakes, righteous anger, and my broken story, I pledge to move forward and embrace the experience of freedom right here and right now. I pledge allegiance to the expression of my spiritual honesty. I fully own the fact that my presence here in this body and on this earth is a celebration of uniqueness and importance. Creation makes no mistakes. I am a creation of life, of a higher power, of perfection. My reason for being here matters in the grand divine plan. I must be honest with my contract of life and walk the path of my destiny with conviction, purpose, and grace. I pledge allegiance to the quiet soldier within. I understand that the championing spirit that is already cellularly alive inside of me, that was already in place at the time of my birth, waits patiently for my current belief about myself to join it in its knowing. I march forward towards a history of my own making, wisely, lovingly choosing the means by which I spread my beliefs and convictions. I never make others wrong for their chosen path, for I recognize the innumerable roads that lead to the one. I pledge allegiance to a partnership with divinity. I choose to see others and myself from eyes that already view the wholeness and perfection within. I do not entertain our past damage or encourage us to identify with it, for I trust that a grander calling card has been printed for us to distribute in promoting our lives. I champion all of us to celebrate what is working rather than what isn't. I pledge allegiance to wise discernment, knowing when to speak and when to remain quiet, knowing when to comfort and when to leave alone, knowing when to intervene and when to avoid rescuing and interfering. I pledge allegiance to people and projects of substance. I cannot travel this road alone. If there is anything we need as a species, it is each other. I actively choose to support those whose work I believe in with my time, talent, and treasure. I joyously give to those whose intention and purpose is for self-empowerment and the awakening of humanity to its personal magnificence. I rally to make others aware of such light bearers and do what I can to support them in furthering their vision. I pledge allegiance to the freedom from comparison. I once and for all lay down my wearisome, stale beliefs of unworthiness and not being good enough. I know that my past does not define who I am. I am forever evolving, growing, and learning. I recognize that I am a marvel. I now choose opportunities to let my voice be heard, to let my light shatter the darkness of futility so that every personal dream is explored. I pledge allegiance in knowing that things are not always as they seem. Just because something can't be seen with the physical eye or rationalized by our current mode of understanding does not negate its existence. Understanding the difference between reality and illusion, I move into a fuller acceptance of the non-physical, the mystical, intuitive, soul aspect of living that expands my consciousness and deepens my days. I pledge allegiance to actions that fulfill the greatest good for all. By becoming a gatekeeper of compassion, tolerance, and love, I move into a fuller conviction of pure intent with regard to the words that I speak and the choices that I make. I pursue a win-win in all activities of life. I pledge allegiance to those who have gone before me, the ancestral lineage whose courage, sacrifice, and conviction still live in my bones. I honor the privileges given to me today because of the sweat from their pioneering efforts and the fortitude of their convictions. I give thanks for my responsibility in creating the same for future generations. I pledge allegiance to a love that has no agenda. I no longer choose to give for what I might get, to manipulate in order to control, to abandon before I can be abandoned, to tolerate because there are seemingly no other options. I choose to love as a way of being. I am content in my choice whether outside circumstances respond or not. In being love, I create fulfillment above and beyond what the human condition can provide. I pledge allegiance to the sacredness of laughter, knowing that the greatest healing force that exists reverberates from the vibration of this holy and irreplaceable gift. I allow humor, joy, and eruptions of laughter to make their home in my heart. I let my physical body respond to the sacred stimulus and biological wonder that laughter creates, and vow to keep this attribute alive and thriving all the days of my life.
All right, are we ready to be for something? To open our hearts and know that each and every one of us truly makes a difference in so many more lives than we could ever imagine. Thank you. So it is, so it will be. Namaste.